everyone. This is Laura Jo Leisenstadt with All About Breastfeeding. Today I am waiting for the members in my All About Breastfeeding class. It is a paid online breastfeeding class. I am waiting for people to come into our Zoom meeting. We typically meet for an hour or so every Saturday morning where everyone in the class gets to come on and we get to see each other live, sometimes see the babies, and get to answer questions about breastfeeding, talk about life as mothers, talk about transitioning back to work, pumping, all kinds of issues related to breastfeeding and mothering. So while I'm waiting for some members to come on, I thought that I would read a post that comes from the All About Breastfeeding community, which is a free Facebook group that I have. You can find it by going to All About Breastfeeding Community, searching for those words in Facebook. And there was a post that was put in this week, and I will just say first names. And I felt that it was an excellent question and something that comes up all the time. So much so that when I designed the course, I put in several hours, several hours of information that addresses just this issue. So here's a question put in by Jamie, and you'll see me with my eyes down because I'm reading from my phone. I can't memorize the whole thing. She said, "Mamas, how do you deal with family members thinking they're being supportive when they're not really that supportive? Mostly, I keep the irritation to myself and try to educate on the correct information, but I just find it so annoying lately. A few examples over the past 6 months of exclusively breastfeeding my son. When I just wanted to vent about how difficult and stressful I found pumping to be, my husband suggested that maybe we needed to find another way to feed him. For example, supplement rather than figuring out how to make this process easier for me. My mother-in-law repeatedly asking, when can he have something else besides milk? When will he stop breastfeeding during the night? My husband astounded that breastfeeding babies won't need more milk per bottle as they get older. He insists that when our son weighs 30 pounds, he will certainly need more milk than when he weighed 9 pounds. I tried to patiently explain that it will always be 1 to 1.5 ounces per hour and that the nutritional content of milk changes for baby's needs. And that obviously nutrition will come more from solids too as he gets older. And most recently, he only started solids, baby-led weaning, 4 days ago. The mother-in-law has already asked that I leave a bottle of water for him when she watches him for 1 hour after daycare before I get home. I replied, no, he only needs sips of water during meals right now. Why the rush, the pressure to stop breastfeeding? Lack of education, miseducation? Actually, it's both. They all acknowledge that it's a healthier thing for babies, but yet somehow come across as not being really fully supportive. This will be continuing for as long as my son and I decide to breastfeed, so I guess we'll have to get used to it. I appreciate the space to vent a little, as no one else really truly gets it." And she added the cutest picture. She said, "Here's a picture of my little nugget proudly celebrating his first avocado on his 6-month birthday." And he's sitting in the high chair with a tray filled of little pieces of avocado. It is really cute. So what I'm going to do is first say that your comments, Jamie, are incredibly common. Sometimes people just aren't supportive, period. Even ones who are supportive, it is a lack of education or, like you said, miseducation about why our family members insist on certain things. So the first thing I'm going to do is read some of the responses from some of our members, and again, just going to use first names. Jennifer said, "I think you said it best. It's really a lot of outdated and misinformation. I found this group and the podcast a great way to gain the knowledge I needed to explain why what I'm saying is accurate and best." And Jamie responded and said, "I'm so grateful for this space. Without it, I'm not sure we would have made it so long in our breastfeeding relationship. Liz said, it's always good to come here to vent to people that understand. And when they say come here, what they're meaning is to come into the All About Breastfeeding Community Facebook group. I think your husband is likely trying to help and just doesn't realize why his suggestions aren't helpful. Regarding the bottles, formula-fed babies do require more formula. So a lot of people think that applies to breast milk too, like my mother-in-law. She insists that my daughter needs more, but when I give her more, it's just spit up. So I just repeat the same thing to my mother-in-law as needed. I started giving my 6-month-old a straw cup with water just for fun to practice. My mother gave me bottles of water when I was a baby. My pediatrician suggests waiting 9 months before they really drink water. Again, I just tell my mom that the pediatrician said no water until 9 months, and I repeat it as needed. You got a lot of patience, Liz, as do most of us when we're trying to educate family members. Share the guidance with them. And I really like that she said this, be firm in your requests. You may not change their mind though. So as long as they're following your requests, you might have to deal with the quote unquote advice. And congratulations on 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding. Yes, congratulations on that, Jamie. So Jamie responded, thank you. There's definitely no ill intent. It's just exhausting to repeat myself so much. I will keep it up and hope to one day break through. And you're absolutely right, Jamie. Frequently, there is no ill intent. It's just that they just don't understand how breastfeeding works. Liz said, oh, I know. I'm on kid number 3 and still repeating things. Trust me, venting here is the most productive thing you can do. And she also said, I will say that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law have come around in terms of being helpful and supportive of breastfeeding over time, even if sometimes they frustrate me. Jamie said, oh Lord, I'm glad that they've come around. I don't mean to say that my family hasn't been supportive because they do say they know what's best for him and are great about nursing. It's just those weird comments. Hopefully, our generation will swing society back around as a whole. Lisa said, I had to just tell my husband that I needed his support and to trust what I'm saying, or I'll make him listen to the podcast. I love that. That in mind, is there a podcast on how to be a supportive husband while your wife breastfeeds? You know, that would teach them some very basic info and stop them from questioning us. And then she tagged me. Kat said, trust me, I go through the same thing all the time with my mother and mother-in-law. I just came to the point where I just say, whenever baby is ready to stop, then I'll stop. And after a while, hubby just started backing me up. My little one is 2 months old though, but it's been extremely annoying. And Jamie posted, keep with it, mama. Now I came in, sometimes I don't get to come in until the end of my workday, and sometimes I like to just see what other people have to say before I chime in. So I came in and I said, what a great question, Jamie, and it's one that I get asked a lot, so much so that I added a whole section in my online breastfeeding class on this subject and made it very specific to partners. While we get flack or weird comments or annoying comments or untruths from many people in our close circle, I find that when your partner is totally on board, they can be your breastfeeding guardian. Let them respond to the in-laws and siblings and parents and others close to you. So the way I see it, we really must have our partners have a pretty good darn understanding of how breastfeeding works in order to be your best advocate and breastfeeding guardian. And this has a lot to do with, that particular advice has a lot to do with leading up to breastfeeding, because a lot of people ask questions. And then the very early days of breastfeeding, particularly when we tend to be at our worst, we're really tired, we're exhausted, incredibly fatigued, we're unsure of what we're doing, we're dealing with healing and recovering from a pregnancy, a birth, getting used to the transition of becoming a mom. If you're already a mom, you're adding another baby to the family, and you have so much going on in your head emotionally and physically that sometimes you just don't have it in you to first start educating others. And for some of us, if we have a good relationship with our side of the family, we just tend to do a better job of it with mothers and sisters and aunts. If you're not as close or don't have the best relationship with mother-in-laws and people on the other side of the family or friends, it becomes that much more difficult. I think it's nice as a couple to decide who will be helping you deal and cope with friends, families, relatives who may be questioning what it is that you're doing. So that's actually part of the class, is thinking ahead of time. Who is it that we are going to need to have these conversations with and educate? Who is most likely to say negative things? And even if we don't know if there's going to be anybody, to just come to a decision between both of you about who will be able to handle it. And it might be you, and you just have really good information for them, or it might be your partner. So, for instance, if once your husband has a really good understanding of pumping and supplementing and exactly what is in human milk, I tend to realize that there will be a greater understanding of it, and then perhaps a greater interest in helping you figure out what to do and how to support you when telling him that pumping is stressful. So, in other words, for you, if you're complaining that pumping is hard, it's stressful, whatever feelings that you're having, to first try and express that to your husband and explain to him why can be really difficult, particularly if they're not getting it. So it would be nice for your husband to know ahead of time why some women find pumping stressful, everything that goes into it, so that rather than fix it in a way that won't be helpful to you, that they can support you in a way that will be most helpful. Once your partner understands little things like there are over 100,000 living cells in just 1 tablespoon of your milk, and understanding exactly what is in breast milk, he will better understand why he will not keep adding more and more volume of milk as he gets older. Your milk has several hundred ingredients, which most people don't know, and formula has about 45. So it is missing a lot of ingredients, and it is a very stable fluid. In other words, it is the same ingredients from the time it's put in the bottle until a year or so when it expires. And your milk has hundreds of ingredients that are literally changing from feeding to feeding, day to day, to meet the needs of your growing baby. Not the baby next door, not your neighbor's, not your cousin's baby, but for your baby. So when they learn the details about what is in human milk, and they start to really understand and get that it is tailor-made to meet your baby's needs, I find that they don't have those same kinds of questions about, for instance, in this case, why won't they need to have a greater volume of milk once they know that it's tailor-made for your baby. They will also understand why babies wake up frequently at night, which is a big question and a big push in families to get babies to sleep longer. But once they understand what is in human milk and why babies need to eat every couple of hours, at least for the first few months, they get it. And then they are more of a supportive person in helping you in whatever it is you need during the day and during at night to sustain those frequent feedings, rather than say, what can we do to get this baby to sleep longer at night? So just for instance, one of the reasons that your supply is, one of the reasons why babies feed more frequently at night, we learned, is that your supply is greater at night and they can get more milk than during the day. And another reason is that your baby literally gets thirsty. And a lot of people don't know that your milk is 90% water, so it's hydration, and 10% all of those 400 and something ingredients. So we get thirsty at night, and so do babies. So what I told her that I was going to tag her in another thread so I can post a little bit more of a detailed response. So I am going to look for that post right now. So a little bit later in the day, I came back and I posted this in the group. because I wanted to answer the question about doing a podcast talking about partners and how they can be supported. So I said, in answer to the question, how do you deal with family members who say they are supportive, but they may not really be as supportive as they say or as you need for them to be? My answer, my basic answer, is actually quite simple. It may be a little time consuming for them to put in the effort, but the answer is basic. Your partner really needs to have a true understanding of how the breast makes milk, how breastfeeding actually works, the nutrients in human milk, how it is absorbed by your baby, why they wake up frequently to eat, and in what ways specifically they can fully support you. I find that when mothers and grandmothers really have a really good basic understanding of breastfeeding, and this is not about how do you latch your baby on, how do you know it's a good latch, those are all really important, but they don't know, even we don't know before we have our baby. I want you to think about this, like before you had your baby, what is it? Write down what it is you thought about breastfeeding. Write down what it is you thought about how frequently your baby would be feeding and how the feedings would go and what would happen at night feedings. We kind of have these just thoughts in our head, and based on what we've been told by friends, what we read, what we heard in a class, and then the reality of you sitting down literally with a baby at your breast many times a day for cumulatively of at least 8 hours or so a day. A week later, you are in a whole different thought process than you ever probably were during pregnancy. And why are you in that headspace and not your husband? Because he is still in that same spot that you were before you had your baby. Just whatever his thoughts were, what he was told, he has no practical application of it. And just because you are now in the house with the baby breastfeeding, he still is not the one sitting breastfeeding the baby, having a baby attached, that emotional attachment, any anxiety you might have, making sure your baby is well fed, or if it's not going well. He's hearing it from you, but he's not the one living it. And therein lies the big separation as to why some are not as supportive. But when they have the knowledge base, a really good, solid knowledge base, you are even different as an early newborn breastfeeding mother, and your partner will be also. So I have not done a podcast on this subject because I do feel the answer is more than just citing a list of things they can do to help you. I mean, we all know, yes, they can help you get some rest. They can bring you water. They can make you meals. They can clean up the house. They can perhaps tell people it's time to go or today's not a good day. They can help with diaper changes and rocking and feeding a baby. That is a list of things that they can do, and it's just a short list. But again, knowing the practical things that they can do to help you, such as I just said, and having a really good basic understanding of breastfeeding and how it works, well, I have found over the years that that goes a very, very, very long way. So I haven't done a podcast on the subject because I do feel the answer is more than just citing a list of things. I think they really need to understand the rudiments of breastfeeding. Once they do, all sorts of light bulbs go off. And I even find that in the classes that I teach, the same things happens with breastfeeding mothers. All sorts of light bulbs go off when they realize that a newborn's baby is the size of a small marble. It can only take so much nutrients in at once, which is just one of the many reasons they are feeding frequently. A lot of people don't really understand that, and that their stomach needs to gradually stretch out. Some members shared some good tips on how to deal with unsupportive people in your life in the post, and I wanted to thank them for this. But I also feel strongly about this subject that I spent quite a bit of time in my online breastfeeding class with a module that is geared towards partners. I'm not going to give it all away, but I'm going to just talk and say one of the modules that I have as an introduction to this section on partners. I think it can really help you see my mindset and why I think it is important that partners take the class so that they can have a good understanding of breast milk. So here is part of the written script to the introduction to the module. Here we go. When I was registering partners for breastfeeding classes, it surprises me how often moms ask me if it's important for their partners to attend class. I am told that partners will frequently say that breastfeeding class is like a girls' night out. Since they are not the ones breastfeeding, why do they need to be there? I mean, if I didn't know much about breastfeeding, I have to say that sounds reasonable to me. But I do know a lot about breastfeeding, and I do see what happens in postpartum lives. So I see breastfeeding as a family affair. You are in this together. Since early breastfeeding is going to happen largely in the home and is going to happen at least 8 times or more a day, and it's going to take at least 8 hours a day, and you are going to be there for most of it, how can this be anything but a family affair? She is the one putting the baby to the breast. Yes, we all know that. However, everything that she needs to know about breastfeeding, you need to know also. During the time I spent helping moms with breastfeeding during their hospital stay and in my private practice, it is crystal clear to me how important partners are. You are in a unique position to make a huge difference in your baby's life and your partner's life. What happens now in your relationship when you need each other for support? My guess is that when one of you needs a boost, the other is there to help bring them up. When you're in a funk, your partner is the one to make you laugh and get you outside your head. You are each other's cheering team and one of the reasons why you are so good together. For you to be her best supporter, her cheering team, the person that she loves the most, who is telling her she is doing a great job, I cannot tell you, all of this goes a long way in helping the new mother cope with the early days of exhaustive motherhood. I see it all the time in private consults. I am sitting there with mom, I'm helping her, and it actually just comes very naturally for me because I see where she started and I see the progress and I get so excited. I'm like, wow, look at it. You did it all by yourself. It's not hurting. Look at how your body's responding. Look at your baby. They're just relaxing at the breast and starting to feed. They're not all over the place, kicking arms and legs and flailing about. They're not crying anymore. They're just relaxing and feeding. And I just get so excited. I'm like, wow, really great job. And I could see that the partners start to realize how important it is for them to say, wow, you look so relaxed. Look at the baby. You're doing such a great job. And they get excited when I get excited, but I could see the difference in the moms when their partner is recognizing how hard it has been and the progress that they have made, and that they are genuinely saying, wow, good job, you're doing great. I was going to say, like, never underestimate how good it makes mothers feel to have their partners acknowledging, truly acknowledging how well they're doing, especially when they've been seeing them struggle. And along with this verbal support, you can really be a huge help if you're knowledgeable about specific breastfeeding topics. So for the guys, for the partners, I'm going to throw out a bunch of topics, and I want you to keep track of how many you know the answers to. So just take note, put a little line on a piece of paper for every single topic that you feel that you have a pretty good understanding of. Here we go. Number 1, exactly what is this whole latch-on thing all about? Number 2, exactly how does a mom help her baby achieve a deep latch? 3, how do you know when this deep latch is actually achieved? 4, what are ways that you can help her with this if she is struggling? 5, how is she going to breastfeed if her nipples crack and bleed? What else might she do, and how can you help her? Next question, how do you check to see if your baby is feeding well? What are you even looking for? How do you know when your baby is done feeding? How do you know when your baby's full? Wants the other side? How can you tell if your baby is done feeding? How can you tell if your baby has had a good feeding? If the feeding was a good one, how come your baby feeds so frequently? Another question, what exactly is in breast milk anyway? Another question, you know your baby's supposed to gain weight, but what if they lose weight? How much weight loss is appropriate in how many days? What are they supposed to gain? How frequently are they supposed to gain? How much is too much weight loss? Another question, what if the doctors are advising you to offer formula from a bottle? What do you do? She's sitting there saying, I really don't want to give formula, and they're pushing for formula. What can you do to help her? Both of you have decided you really only want your baby to have mommy's milk. What is the big deal anyway about pumping? Well, we talk a lot about pumping in the class, and they get a pretty good education about it and can be incredibly helpful when you are going through some hard times. So you have the nursing chair and stool and 2 nursing pillows. Everything is all set up in the nursery. But what if, in real life, this is not working well for her? Her back aches and her wrists are getting sore from breastfeeding. What can you do to help? Do you know much about engorgement, clogged ducts, blisters, blebs, hand expression? If you need to supplement, how to go about it, upright and pace feeding? I've actually lost track of all the questions, which is why I stopped numbering them. But honestly, this is just a fraction of everything that we go over in the class and a fraction of everything that I feel it's really important for both of you to learn. So what happens is if you are lucky enough to take an excellent breastfeeding class, and of course I think mine is the best, when I taught in hospitals and even in a private practice, I only had about 2 hours with parents. And in the breastfeeding class, the 2 hours is expanded to over 40, 50 hours already of information that I have in the class. And it is designed in such a way that, yeah, it's over 50 hours, but some of that is talking about breastfeeding after the 2nd and 3rd month. There's a lot about preparing and the early months of breastfeeding. And what I find is that when parents have the information and they can go back to it again and again, and then they can review it with their partner, learn about it ahead of time, review it with your partner afterwards, that both of you are in a much better place to have a really good understanding of the rudiments of breastfeeding. And this is exactly my answer to what I think that you can do, because we can do the easy part. We can cite all of these little bits of information, and we can cite a whole laundry list of what your husband can do for you, but that actually just goes a small way. What goes a very long way is them having a really good understanding of how the whole breastfeeding works, how breasts make milk, how babies transfer milk. So I thought that I would just go over, and this is for anybody who's wondering about the All About Breastfeeding community. These are posts that we get on a regular basis, issues related to breastfeeding. There was probably 10 other really excellent posts that we had just this week alone. And what happens is moms who are maybe a bit more experienced, who have been there, done that, come back and love to support and help out each other. Sometimes people don't know what the answer is and they're just trying to help each other, and then I'll chime in. Sometimes people add information that is not the right information. And so I will come in and say, okay, thank you everybody for your advice. And these are the pieces of advice that are really excellent. And here's why I'm not a fan of this particular advice. And here's my take on it. So it's a really excellent group. That is our free group. And if you wanted to join the paid class, you can go to aabreastfeeding.com/breastfeeding class. That is where you get a lot more specific help, individualized help, and the whole comprehensive class, which is so much more than any class that you could take locally. All right. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, putting on little food for thought when you think about breastfeeding class, when you think about your partners and how helpful and supportive they will be, because they will be the ones saying to, first of all, they'll be saying a lot less to you about why don't you find another way of feeding your baby, or no, I'm worried that you're not going to be producing like 8 and 9 and 10 ounces as the baby gets to be 30 and 40 pounds. They will know why that does not need to happen. So it will eliminate a whole host of questions and concerns, and then they will be your breastfeeding guardian and be really helpful to answer questions and back you up in front of family and friends, because sometimes that's just really hard for the newly postpartum mom to be the one to keep answering the same questions over and over again. But when two of you are standing together, both saying the same thing, that goes a long way. All right, that is it for now. And thank you so much for being here. Bye now.